Welcome back to Mega Stadiums. Today, we're rolling the clock back to 1992, when the very first Premier League season kicked off. It was a different time. Fewer TV cameras, no billion-dollar sponsorships, and stadiums packed with raw atmosphere. Some of these iconic grounds have been rebuilt. Some are long gone, but all of them helped launch the modern football era. Join us to take a full journey through all 21 original stadiums of the first Premier League season. Let's go. Highbury Stadium, Arsenal FC. We begin at Highbury, Arsenal's historic home from 1913 to 2006 that nicknamed the home of football. Highbury was known for its stunning Art Deco design, especially the iconic east and west stands that gave the stadium a unique, almost regal appearance. By 1992, Highbury's capacity was just over 38,000, making it one of the more compact grounds in the league, but the atmosphere was famously intense. Many club legends, including Thierry Henry and Tony Adams, played here, and it remained one of the most iconic grounds in English football until its closure. Villa Park, Aston Villa. Next up, Villa Park, one of English football's crown jewels. Since opening in 1897, Villa Park has been a venue for FA Cup semi-finals, international matches, and countless unforgettable club moments. By 1992, it stood as one of the biggest and grandest stadiums outside Manchester or London, boasting around 39,000 capacity. The whole end, then one of the largest standing terraces in England, was famous for its sheer size and deafening roar. Ewood Park, Blackburn Rovers. At the start of the Premier League era, Blackburn Rovers were building something special, and so was Ewood Park. Opened in 1882, it was one of the oldest grounds in the league, but underwent massive modernization in the early 90s thanks to Jack Walker's investment. Ewood Park mixed the charm of an old-school ground with the facilities of a new era. By the mid-90s, Blackburn would lift the Premier League trophy right here, proof that dreams could still be built on foundations laid a century earlier. Stamford Bridge, Chelsea. Stamford Bridge in 1992 was a very different beast compared to the sleek stadium we know today. Originally opened in 1877, it had hosted football since 1905, but the early 90s saw it looking rugged and worn. Only the giant East Stand, built in the 1970s, hinted at future ambition. The rest of the stadium was patchwork. Temporary seating, open terracing, and even greyhound racing had been part of its story. But within that ruggedness was real soul. Chelsea's hardcore supporters packed it out, creating a fierce atmosphere that helped forge the club's fighting identity before Roman Abramovich's billions arrived. Highfield Road, Coventry City. Coventry's Highfield Road had already made history as the first all-seater stadium in England, a move that was way ahead of its time in the early 80s. Tight, compact, and close to the pitch, Highfield Road was a nightmare for visiting teams when the home fans were in full voice. The Sky Blues faithful generated a wall of noise, even though the stadium's condition was beginning to show its age by 1992. There were no flashy stands or corporate suites, just pure working-class football energy. After nearly a century of memories, Coventry moved to the Ricoh Arena in 2005, leaving Highfield Road to history. Selhurst Park, Crystal Palace. Selhurst Park has been the heart and soul of Crystal Palace since 1924. In 1992, it was a true working-class fortress, an old-school, no-frills ground tucked into the suburbs of South London. The stadium's famous Holmesdale End, a wall of passionate fans, created a deafening, almost claustrophobic noise when Palace were on the front foot. It wasn't the biggest stadium, holding just over 26,000 at the time. Known for its traditional, no-frills design, it served as a solid base for the club during the early Premier League years. Goodison Park, Everton. Known as the Grand Old Lady of English football, Goodison Park was already dripping with history by 1992. Opened in 1892, a full century earlier, it had hosted countless iconic moments, including World Cup matches in 1966. The Gladys Street Inn was the soul of the stadium, where Evertonians sang their hearts out. In a time before luxury boxes and corporate suites dominated football, Goodison was pure, raw passion, a true cathedral of the people's game. Portman Road, Ipswich Town. Tucked away in the Suffolk countryside, Portman Road has been Ipswich Town's home since 1884. By the early 90s, it was one of the more traditional, modest stadiums in the Premier League, but what it lacked in size it made up for in charm and loyalty. The stands were close to the pitch, fostering an intimate atmosphere. This was the ground that had once hosted European nights under Sir Bobby Robson. And though those glory days were fading by 1992, Portman Road still carried the pride of a club that had once conquered Europe. Elland Road, Leeds United. By 1992, it was a powerhouse of noise and fear, especially after Leeds had just won the final Old First Division title the season before. The stadium, capable of housing nearly 40,000 fans, was a cauldron where opposing teams were routinely overwhelmed by the ferocious home support. With its tough, no-nonsense stands and brutal atmosphere, Elland Road perfectly mirrored the hard-edge playing style Leeds was famous for. It was, and still is, a ground where football isn't just played. It's lived, fought, and celebrated with every ounce of passion. Anfield Road, Liverpool. Even in 1992, Anfield was already hallowed ground. Home to Liverpool's astonishing success during the 70s and 80s, the stadium carried an almost mystical aura. The legendary Cop Stand, then still a vast standing terrace, could hold up to 16,000 singing, swaying fans, a moving red wall of passion and pride. Walking into Anfield meant feeling a history that almost weighed in the air around you. In the early Premier League era, Anfield remained one of football's most intimidating and emotionally powerful venues. Maine Road, Manchester City. Before the skyscrapers and chic money, Manchester City called Maine Road home, affectionately known as the Wembley of the North. Opened in 1923, Maine Road had once hosted crowds of over 80,000, though by 1992 it seated around 32,000 fans. Set in the heart of Moss Side, the stadium had a gritty, authentic feel, unpredictable and full of character. Maine Road was where loyalty mattered more than trophies, and every match felt like a battle for pride, not just points. Old Trafford, Manchester United. Old Trafford, the theater of dreams, was already well on its way to becoming the behemoth it is today. In 1992, the stadium was undergoing transformation, with new all-seater regulations after Hillsborough modernizing the stands. Home to legends like Eric Cantona and Ryan Giggs, Old Trafford was the epicenter of a club on the cusp of global domination. The famous Stretford End, home of United's most passionate supporters, provided a deafening backdrop. Even back then, stepping onto the Old Trafford pitch felt like entering the biggest stage in English football. Ayresome Park, Middlesbrough. Ayresome Park was the beating heart of Middlesbrough until 1995. Opened in 1903 and set tightly among terraced houses, Ayresome Park was a traditional English ground through and through. It wasn't the biggest, but when Borough fans were roaring, it felt like a fortress. Famous for hosting matches in the 1966 World Cup, Ayresome was rich in history, even if by 1992, it was a little worn around the edges. Carrow Road, Norwich City. Carrow Road, home of Norwich City since 1935, was, and still is, a charming, close-knit stadium. Nestled near the River Wonsum, it had an old-school feel where the crowd felt almost on top of the players. Though modest in size compared to Premier League giants, Carrow Road proved a tough place to visit. And in 1992 to 93, Norwich would surprise everyone by finishing third in the table. City Ground, Nottingham Forest. The City Ground was synonymous with success thanks to Brian Clough's legendary four-a-sides of the late 70s and early 80s. Situated right beside the River Trent, the stadium had a picturesque yet intimidating presence. The Trent End and the Brian Clough Stand held generations of passionate Forest fans who had tasted European glory. By 1992, Forest was struggling a bit on the pitch, but the City Ground remained a place steeped in ambition and pride. Boundary Park, Oldham Athletic. high, exposed, and brutally cold. That was Boundary Park. Known jokingly as one of the coldest stadiums in England, Oldham's home stood on the edge of the Pennines, where biting winds whipped across the pitch. The stadium had an old-world charm, with its aging stands and rugged terraces. Despite its small size, Boundary Park was a fortress for Oldham, tough for any visiting side. Under Joe Royle's management, Oldham's team played fearless football, and their ground was a place where bigger clubs often struggled. Loftus Road, Queen's Park Rangers. Loftus Road might have been one of the smallest stadiums in the league, but it packed a punch. Home to QPR since 1917, it was tight, cozy, and intimidating. The stands were right on top of the pitch, making it feel like a cauldron when the fans were up for it. By 1992, the stadium had just over 18,000 capacity, but that compactness gave QPR a massive home advantage. Bramall Lane, Sheffield United. Bramall Lane is the oldest professional football stadium still in use, first hosting matches way back in 1862. By 1992, it had the gritty feel of a true football fortress. With its steep stands and intense crowd, Bramall Lane created a suffocating atmosphere for visitors. The Sheffield crowd prided themselves on their no-nonsense support, and you could feel the energy ripple across the stands. It was a place built on tradition, pride, and Yorkshire steel. Hillsborough, Sheffield Wednesday. Hillsborough, sadly known for tragedy in 1989, was a stadium of great beauty and tradition by the time the Premier League launched. The famous Spian Kop stand loomed over the pitch, and on big days the atmosphere was unforgettable. In 1992, Hillsborough was both a place of remembrance and celebration, carrying the weight of history, but also the dreams of a new era. The Dell, Southampton. The Dell was like no other stadium, small, quirky, and utterly unique. The stands were tight against the pitch, making it one of the most intimidating places to play despite its modest size. Southampton's fans crammed into every nook and cranny, creating a fierce, noisy home advantage. The stadium's unusual corners and cramped layout gave it character you couldn't replicate anywhere else. By the early 90s, the Dell had seen legends like Matt Le Tissier weave magic on its turf, a true gem of English football lore. White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur. White Hart Lane was Tottenham's fortress, a tight, electric ground where the noise could be overwhelming. Opened in 1899, the lane had a blend of old charm and passionate modern support. The famous shelf side stand became the heart of Spurs' loyal fans, creating an atmosphere that shook visiting teams. In 1992, Tottenham were a team of flair and drama, and White Hart Lane mirrored that perfectly, a place where every match felt like a grand occasion. Selhurst Park, Wimbledon. In 1992, Wimbledon didn't have their own stadium. Instead, they shared Selhurst Park with Crystal Palace. The Crazy Gang, as they were known, thrived despite this unusual situation. Though they lacked a true home, their fearless style made every home match a nightmare for opponents. Selhurst, in that era, was a house for two, but Wimbledon's fighting spirit made it feel like theirs too. And there you have it, a full tour through the 22 legendary stadiums that witnessed the birth of the Premier League. Some of these grounds have been rebuilt, some have been lost forever, but all of them helped shape the greatest football league on earth. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week with another exciting video.